Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're jumping right into a truly cinematic journey into what is probably history's most misunderstood, overlooked, and just undeniably resilient empire. I mean, we're talking about a civilization that stood as this absolute beacon of power and wealth, while the rest of the world around it was basically descending into chaos. So get ready, because the sheer scale of this story is definitely going to shift your perspective. 1,000. Just think about that number for a second. For over 1,000 years, this one legendary empire stood completely firm. Think about how many generations that is, how many kingdoms rose and fell in that massive chunk of time. This empire didn't just exist, it literally held the line for the entire Western world, acting as this massive, impenetrable wall against constant threats. Section 1. Rome's Unlikely Eastern Survivor. Okay, let's dive into this. What actually happened after the famous fall of the Roman Empire? Well, we all know the famous story of the fall of Rome, right? But here's the catch. The story of Rome didn't actually end in 476 AD. It just moved east. So while the western half completely fell apart and gave way to the Dark Ages, the eastern half survived. And honestly, it didn't just survive, it transformed into something totally extraordinary. It became the Byzantine Empire, anchored by its capital city, Constantinople. And make no mistake, Constantinople wasn't just some surviving outpost. It became one of the absolute richest, most powerful cities in all of human history. It was literally the beating heart of global trade and wealth. Just look at the immense gap here between 476 AD and 1453 AD. While Western Europe was out there fracturing into countless small warring kingdoms, the Byzantine Empire kept this continuous, unbroken chain of Roman legacy going for an entire millennium. It's like a giant puzzle piece of history that stayed perfectly intact. The scale of that survival is just mind-boggling. Section 2. 1,000-Year Shield. So how exactly did they spend that millennium? Well, they functioned as a literal shield for the developing world. First, they protected Europe from endless waves of invasions, basically absorbing the shock on their borders so the West could slowly rebuild. Second, they meticulously preserved ancient Greek and Roman knowledge. We're talking the scrolls, the philosophy, the science that would have otherwise been lost to time forever. And third, they spread Christianity all across Eastern Europe, which, as we know, fundamentally shaped the cultural fabric of the whole continent. Section 3. Justinian and the Hagia Sophia. To really wrap our heads around this empire's absolute peak, we have to talk about Justinian I. This guy wasn't content with just scraping by and surviving in the east. No way. He looked at the map, saw all those fallen western territories, and just decided he was going to take them back. He was actively trying to rebuild the old Roman Empire, pushing his armies outwards to reclaim that lost glory of Rome. His ambition was, quite frankly, off the charts. And Justinian proved his empire was the true successor to Rome by building the massive Hagia Sophia. Now, this wasn't just another church. This architectural marvel was the ultimate, breathtaking symbol of his golden age. It projected pure wealth, untouchable power, and divine favor. When you walked into the Hagia Sophia back then, you absolutely knew you were standing right in the center of the world. But here's the thing, you can't have all that staggering wealth without someone trying to come along and take it. That is exactly where the walls of Constantinople come in. These legendary defenses kept the empire and its capital incredibly safe from invaders for centuries. But it wasn't just about piling up stone, it was how they combined those massive walls with a remarkably strong army and some seriously complex cunning politics. They'd play their enemies against each other, creating this ultimate defensive fortress that seemed totally invincible. Section 4. Cannons and the Epic Fall. Yet, as we all know, nothing lasts forever. Even a 1,000-year shield eventually takes a few too many hits. The seemingly invincible empire started to experience this slow, agonizing rot. And the fatal weakness really came down to a devastating cycle of three things. First, constant wars on all sides that completely drained their manpower. Second, bitter internal conflicts and political backstabbing that tore their leadership apart from the inside. And third, a steady economic decline that basically starved the empire of the resources it desperately needed to maintain that strong army and those legendary walls. And then, the year 1453 arrives. The Ottoman conquest of Constantinople is launched, led by Mehmed II, and he brings something to the battlefield that completely changes the rules of war forever: giant cannons. We're talking unprecedented, massive artillery. Those incredible ancient walls, the ones that had shrugged off swords, arrows, and siege towers for literal centuries, they were relentlessly pounded and finally shattered by the brute force of these giant cannons. And this brilliantly illustrates the dramatic and permanent transfer of global power as the city finally fell. The fall of Constantinople in 1453 wasn't just the loss of a city. It was the definitive end of the Byzantine Empire and simultaneously the explosive rise of the Ottoman Empire. Just like that, the map of the world was rewritten almost overnight. Which brings us to the end of our explainer today, and honestly, it leaves us with a totally mind-bending question. Knowing that they stood firm for an entire millennium, absorbing countless invasions and safely preserving the foundational knowledge of the ancient world, without their 1,000-year shield, what would Europe, and really, the modern world as we know it, even look like today? It's a fascinating alternate history to ponder. Keep questioning, keep learning, and hey, thank you so much for diving into the Byzantine epic with me.